Thursday was a bad day. An Alexander and the terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. That kind of day. I woke that morning to an emotional storm of despair. Will this pandemic ever be over? Will the questions about what is and is not safe to do for me, my family, and for First Parish ever stop coming? How in the world do we sustain a congregation when we're struggling on how to bring us together? How do we welcome in new members, dream about the future, and chart a course for tomorrow when today's problems weigh so heavily? All of this and more caught up with me. I cursed and wept. I journaled and called friends. I showed up to meetings on Zoom, trying my best to moderate my intense emotions. A hard day. Friday was better. The questions were still there and just as fraught as ever. But something important happened on Thursday that made all the difference. I shared how I was feeling with others, and they listened. My partner, Bill, my colleagues, as well as the First Parish folks in those 2 Zoom meetings. The challenges remained, but what changed was the sense that I was not facing them alone. Feeling alone, disconnected from others, is supposed to feel bad for humans. We are built to be in relationship. In our brains, that panic feeling of being left out in the cold was once not merely a metaphor for social isolation, but rather reflected in the real danger of being without one's tribe in the tundra. Vivek Murthy, in his 2020 book, Together, makes this point when he writes, quite simply, human relationship is as essential to our well-being as food and water. Just as hunger and thirst are the body's ways of telling us we need to eat and drink, loneliness is the natural signal that reminds us when we need to connect with other people. And yet, how often do we talk about feeling lonely? When is the last time you shared your own experiences of loneliness with another? Perhaps you are not currently feeling lonely. Perhaps you have never felt lonely. But if you do feel lonely, you are not alone. Research suggests many adults feel lonely. For example, the 2018 AARP survey found that 1 in 3 American adults over the age of 45 felt lonely. In Murthy's time as the 19th Surgeon General of the US, he met many people and read many studies that drew his attention more deeply to loneliness as a major health issue in the US. Loneliness, he suggested, often lies behind addiction, the opioid epidemic, as well as rising suicide rates. This is because loneliness wears many masks and can appear as anger, alienation, sadness, and a host of distressing emotional states. Core to the experience of loneliness is a sense of, quote, missing the feeling of closeness, trust, and affection of genuine friends, loved ones, and community. Importantly, the sense of feeling disconnected from others found in loneliness is not identical to simply being alone. Sometimes we may feel lonely even in a whole crowd of people. Or sometimes we may be all alone but delight in the solitude and the pleasure of one's own company. To make loneliness even more nuanced, researchers have identified 3 kinds of loneliness: intimate or emotional loneliness, which is the longing for an intimate partner or confidant; relational or social loneliness, which is the longing for friendships; and collective loneliness, which is the hunger for that sense of communal belonging to a group with shared purpose, values, and/or interests. In other words, as people, we crave different kinds of connections, and while we may have a satisfying sense of connection in one way, we may still be missing another kind of connection. Sadly, the experience of feeling lonely can kick off a cycle that leads to further withdrawal and more isolation. Feeling lonely often leaves us with a sense of not being likable or even desirable, or not having anything to contribute. Loneliness can both sap us of our self-esteem and kindle a sense of shame, of feeling unworthy of acceptance and belonging. And left alone with such powerful emotions, some turn to alcohol, drugs, work, and other distractions to numb the pain. And some may externalize their inner pain as violence against others. This can be particularly risky for men and boys who are too often not given tools to connect with their emotions, nor taught how to express them in healthier ways, such as talking to each other. A situation which can be dangerous, a contributing factor in things like breakup violence. How then might we intervene to decrease the loneliness, to help build cultures of connections where fewer people feel alone? A fictional example can be found in the book The Love Story of Missy Carmichael. Has anyone read that here? It's lovely. At 79, Missy lives alone and apart from her estranged daughter, as well as from a son and grandson who live overseas. The book begins with Missy dragging herself on a cold day to a local park to watch a special event, just so that she would have something to write in an email to her son and grandson. But when she unexpectedly faints, strangers come to her aid and assist. As the book unfolds, these strangers become friends, and then some even become close confidants. These friends also become conduits to larger groups, such as the community of dog owners Missy discovers after her friends gift her a dog. While the book begins with Missy isolated, lonely, and sipping a bit too much sherry, by the end of the book, she has new connections in all three areas researchers note: intimate, social, and collective. But that's fiction, right? So here's another example. Following my divorce in my mid-20s, I returned to seminary where I had a group of caring friends. But upon graduation, we scattered. And I returned to Michigan to be near family while I applied to doctoral programs. Distanced from my seminary friends, I was a lonely single mom with a 5-year-old. So I began attending a church. And there I joined a women's group and met a woman named Sandy. Red-headed and warm-hearted, Sandy began inviting my son and me over for brunch after Sunday services. Feeling timid, but also quite lonely, I dared to say yes to her invitation, week after week. In time, Sandy became the dearest of friends. Buoyed by my new friendship with Sandy, I deepened my connection to the church, making other acquaintances and conversations after the service and various events. Attending services and befriending the ministers also fueled my passion for religious questions. In other words, through the church, I found intimate, social, and collective connections that helped to not only assuage my loneliness, but also enrich my life in meaningful and lasting ways. Today, I am a minister not only because of my lifelong love of the spiritual journey, but also because of my lived experience of the transformative power of religious community. Being part of a religious community helped to give me a sense that I belong to a group with a shared purpose. Being part of a church helped me to feel less lonely. Murthy suggests that that first step out of loneliness is to acknowledge that we need connections like food or water. While some of us may feel capable of making or fostering these connections, those who are weary and worn down by loneliness often struggle to do so. To help make it a bit easier, Murthy suggests that we need cultures of connection that encourage us to speak authentically about our experiences, both good and bad. Such authenticity helps us to feel more connected to others, less lonely in our own struggles. At its best, I think our ritual of joys and sorrows does this. Murthy also suggests service as an important path out of loneliness. When we volunteer and give of ourselves, we begin to see, yes, we do have something to give. Receiving gratitude for others can further reinforce our sense of being of use, of being of worth to others. For example, in the love story of Missy Carmichael, Missy's dog became part of her life because her friend asked her to care for it when the owner's life fell into turmoil. Taking the dog began as an act of service to another. But serving on its own is not enough, says Murthy. The service also needs to feel meaningful by being linked to a larger purpose or group that we value. I thought of this week after receiving an email from Jean that all the postcards she had offered for a Reclaim Our Vote effort had already been claimed. Many of us here are willing to serve to defend democracy. But let's go back to my terrible, horrible, no good, very bad Thursday. My biggest despair on that day was uncertainty about how to sustain our congregation as a place of service, larger purpose, and authentic community. How do we continue to meaningfully live out our mission, our purpose as a community within this convoluted context of 2021, a context where I suspect loneliness is even higher? In my darkest moments, I wonder, is there still a point to all of this? Yeah, probably not what you expected your minister to say. And yet you may not be aware that UU ministers are leaving the ministry in high numbers, either permanently or taking leaves for their mental health. And so I ask, am I next? Why try so hard to figure out COVID safety protocols, tech setups, and multi-platform services and programs? Does it still matter? I think it does. And I say that not because I'm supposed to say that, but I do think it does. I say it because I know many of your stories, but also mine. We need places where we can walk into and chance finding a new friend, or at least acquaintances we recognize and who recognize us. We need places where we can feel connected to something that matters to us and to people who agree on that same purpose. We need places where we can serve. We need places where we can find help when we need it. Today, I am asking for your help, you here and you online. The future of this place depends on all of us. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it's complicated to gather in groups, and we may sometimes differ on what it means to do so safely. And still, we need to connect to other people. So I'm asking for your help to figure out how we do this. How can we sustain a culture of connection during an ongoing pandemic? How can we create paths of connection for those among us who are feeling lonely? And based on the statistics as well as what I hear, there are lonely people among us. I don't have clear answers on how to do this, only a strong sense that we need to. So I am asking, will you help figure this out? When I had a hard day, it helped to talk with others. It helped to hear others say how they felt the same sometimes. The challenges remained, but what changed was the sense that I was not alone in facing them. So let us help one another. Let us listen and let us speak up authentically when we are hurting. Let us together figure out how to nurture a culture of connections that just might be a refuge for us all, especially the lonely among us. So may it be. Amen.